without any further ado, it is our pleasure to welcome as our presenters of their neighborhood strategy, Cheryl Smith and Karen Ullman from the City of London. And what I'm remembering, ladies, but if you can maybe give us a bit of context, I'm sure you will, you folks have been at this work for quite some time in some really cool and innovative ways. And you are, as I remember from our last call, in a time of renewal. So you've been at this for several years and you're kind of doing a bit of a step back and reflection and charting the path forward from here. My memory. So correct me if I'm wrong, and then I'm happy to turn it over to you both to introduce yourselves a bit further and walk us through your work.
Great, thanks Sylvia, and you are correct, great memory. I'm Karen Oldham, and I am a community developer with Neighbourhood Children and Fire Services for the City of London, and beside me is Cheryl.
And I'm the Manager of Community Development and Funding.
And so we're probably going to be about 20 minutes. We sort of tried to time this the other day, and we got the go-ahead to take as long as we wanted. So hopefully you won't be bored. We can sort of entertain you, starting with how it all began. And we did try to sort of stick to a bit of the plan on the questions that were asked. So in 2008, several years ago, our City Council strategic plan included community vitality as a priority for the City of London. And the Community Services Department, as it was called at that time, along with the Planning Development Department, believed in livable and inclusive communities where planning focused on place and community services, our area, focused on people. And we both believed that both of those were essential for great neighborhoods. So we proposed that London develop a strategy that was inclusive of all neighborhoods, which was really important to us. We believed that Londoners across the city cared deeply about their neighborhoods. However, we knew there were striking differences between the capacity, the connectedness, and the strength of our different neighborhoods in London. We believed we could only make a difference if we strengthened all of our neighborhoods. This wasn't just about making the disadvantaged better. We took a rise all boats approach. And I think this differentiated us from other municipalities from what we could see. There were key principles that guided our work. We felt all neighborhoods must be included, as we said. And we wanted to make sure that as many people as possible, everybody who wanted to take part could. So we had an open call for all residents, and it was open to individuals who felt passionate about London and about making our neighborhoods great places to live, work, and play.
So you asked who were the key players, and our key players were residents. These were our key players and our sole players in our strategy. We worked very hard to get representation from every neighborhood in London, and we actually got at least one resident for each neighborhood. However, although it wasn't driven, staff highly facilitated this process. And as you can see from the list, the other group of key players were city staff from across our entire corporation. This was the first time back in 2008 that all three departments were engaged in a cross-department initiative of this scale. The process was led from the top with our general managers. They signed off on all council reports and they spoke to council collectively on this. And if I remember correctly, from almost a decade ago, we had 3 internal tables. So this was highly supported internally by city staff. We had a cross-departmental table with a senior manager from each service area, and they were kept informed throughout the process. They met quarterly or sometimes even more often and assisted with strategy, politics, and any challenges. The list you see on the slide was from our facilitators table. We ran each resident task force meeting well prepared and organized. We had a staff facilitator at every table. And I think we had about 12 or 13 tables, if I remember correctly. Our director at that time of Neighborhood and Children's Services facilitated the process. We did open up the first meeting for community chairs, and it was really the residents to decide how they wanted the process to be facilitated. But we're really lucky in that we have an awesome director who is a proven track record in the community for facilitating large groups, and we had well over 100 people. So they liked the idea, let's just get down to the work. And they were good with Lynn facilitating the process because they were clear that they were the decision makers. And then my team, 3 people from my team, my admin staff, one of my community developers, and myself, we literally met every week, planning each meeting, managing the over 100 residents, overseeing all the documents and all the details. So, and then finally, what's kind of important, another key player, we brought in a neighborhood champion from outside the city, so not a city staff person. This was a person well known in the community around neighborhood work and resident driven. It was actually Jim Deers. He was well aligned with the work we wanted to do, and most importantly, he said what we couldn't say as civic administration or city staff. So we brought him at the beginning of the project to launch it, and he came at the end. The residents wanted him back again. They wanted to share what they did, and he kind of gave that rallying cry for the next 5 years of implementation. So the steps we took over a 9-month period to develop a strategy, we were very clear from the beginning what the goal was and the process to get there. And what happened in between was resident driven. Our role was to facilitate. And right away after our first meeting, I had developed a work plan where I had every meeting and everything planned. And wouldn't you know it, was great, the first meeting was develop the vision or the definition of a strong neighborhood. Well, that took us the first 3 meetings, the first 3 months. So all of a sudden, we adjusted, but that was okay. So every meeting we started reminding the task force of the 4 steps that were involved in the process. We reviewed what they accomplished the month before, and we always left each meeting with the task force knowing what they had the opportunity that they could come back at the next meeting and review what they wanted to accomplish. We called it heartburn. So whenever residents made a decision at the end of one meeting, we always inform them at the next meeting we'll review, and so if you have heartburn, we can make changes, because it was very important for us to get consensus throughout the whole process, which we did. So the definition became a vision for all neighborhoods. I think Karen has it on the next slide. And the group also defined elements for a strong neighborhood, and they later aligned all the strategies that they developed with these elements. So in partnership with the Western University, the residents then designed an assessment tool that we would measure where all neighborhoods stood against the vision. So with Western's assistance, they identified metrics for each element, and then they further developed a conversation tool that they took out to their neighborhoods and neighborhood groups to tackle the more qualitative and specific areas that there were gaps in the metrics. We were very conscious not to compare or pit neighborhoods against neighborhoods. This was not what this process was about. If anything, we compared where neighborhoods stood against the overall city, but we did not compare neighborhoods against each other. So now that they had a vision, they knew where each neighborhood stood against that vision. They then developed the strategies, both citywide for all neighborhoods and targeted for specific neighborhoods. And finally, they developed an implementation plan to implement the strategies over a 5-year period. So how did we resource it? So we did not have an additional budget for this. So as administration, we have budgets in different departments. Sorry, we now call them service areas. So in different service areas, we have budgets for external catering, photocopying. So we used everything in every department's budget, internal lines. All the staff you saw, they volunteered their evening hours. Most were management there, and we did this on whatever we had in our base budget in our administrative lines. However, once the strategy was approved, brought to council by the residents, and they approved it, I think it was in the 2nd year of implementation, after we had showed some quick wins, the council actually added $100,000 to my base budget, which then allowed me to implement some of the key strategies that required additional funding. This did not fund staff for me. this funded externally projects that residents were driving. So LSNS became a part of the work we do as a corporation, and it laid the groundwork for future strategies and plans. So you can see LSNS in everything from our new London plan, the shift to age-friendly London, and most recently in our city strategic plan.
So after all that work, through those 9 months, the final outcome was the London Strengthening Neighbourhood Strategy and 5-year implementation plan, which was endorsed in early 2010 by City Council. And this document became the vehicle for collective action, steering all of us to actions that would contribute to a better quality of life in all of our neighborhoods.
So how we implemented it, as I said in the slide that I just talked about, this was grounded and incorporated into the daily work of all the different departments and areas. So as management, we included those strategies that we supported or that were aligned with the work that we had to do as part of implementation into our strategic plans and into actually our performance plans. And then at the last LSNS Resident Task Force meeting, a number of residents, I think there were about 20 or 25, volunteered to be an implementation team over the next 5 years. And that number came and go. In the first few years, they met monthly. And what they did is, it was kind of nice because they held us accountable internally, but they also held each other and a number of the resident-driven teams that were out in the community with other partners implementing the strategies. When they first finalized the plan, they held several community meetings at a citywide and also neighborhood level, and this is where they invited stakeholders. I think a part we forgot to highlight for you is when we brought the resident task force together, it was only residents. We did not allow organizations, not-for-profits, community groups. This was only residents. Of course, sometimes residents come with many hats, but the hat they wore in this meeting was as a resident of a neighborhood. So this is when they then touched base with all their community groups and networks, because they were key and central in implementing the strategies. And of course, part of the implementation plan the residents had done was to identify all the key players in each of the strategies. So here's just a list when we were looking back over the last decade, I guess last 5 or 6 years. These are just some of the groups that residents and city staff has supported talking to and engaging in LSNS.
So evaluation, we didn't undertake an evaluation formally of our process, but each year we held an event to bring everyone together and release a report that gave the community an update on how we were doing against the plan, we being everyone. So this included the accomplishments, what we were currently working on, and what we still needed to do or had decided not to do. And if we weren't doing it, we gave the reason why it wasn't going to happen. And then this past December, just a couple months ago, we did a full report with all of our strategies, sort of an overview, as well as the infographic that you can see the one side of on the slide, which was a document highlighting some of our key accomplishments. So you'll remember that Cheryl said the resident task force built strategies around 14 elements that make up a strong neighborhood. And we identified elements under 2 categories, people and place, and how they work together in partnership. So I'm going to highlight briefly a few strategies and actions that have been accomplished over those 5 years. So under people, we have 200 special events now occurring annually on our city properties. 3 Adopt-A programs were created, with 85 parks being adopted and all 9 ESAs being adopted. Council meetings are now live streamed, with 5 vote in the municipal election workshops, which are offered in a variety of non-official languages. In the last 5 years, there's been 56 Sparks Neighborhood Matching Fund projects in 20 different neighborhoods, including celebrations of diversity, park enhancements, and neighborhood beautification projects. and $250,000 has been invested with an additional $553,000 leveraged from the community over these 5 years through Sparks. So successes under places, London Police Services, the London Fire Department, Neighbourhood Watch, Block Parent, the Middlesex London Health Unit, Community Safety and Crime Prevention Committee, and the City of London worked with local residents to develop a neighbourhood safety audit. And this is a tool that can be used by local residents and neighbourhood groups to identify the safety concerns in their neighbourhoods. The tool then supports them to develop a plan of action to increase safety in their neighbourhood. We also had 11 walk-to-shop projects, including the most recent initiative in Byron, which encourages residents to shop locally and to support businesses in their local neighbourhoods. There have been over 500 community-led park projects in 5 years, and London's first pocket park was created on a corner in our downtown. 207 residents were supported by the City of London to complete the community building certificate program offered by Campus for Communities, and really helped us to build the capacity of our community leadership. 269,665 trees were planted since 2011 as part of our Million Tree Challenge, being the London as a forest city. And through the New Tree Me Fund, 432 trees were planted in 4 neighborhoods by local residents in 2014.
So we reflected back on what were our key learnings over this process. When we completed the strategy, Karen and I, and actually my director, we did a number of presentations. So this is back probably in 2010, and this is what we learned from our very large resident process. So we learned that simple and fun is important. At that time, we had to develop every tool from scratch. There really wasn't like a neighborhood assessment tool. There weren't tools out there to support the process. So we developed those from scratch, and we had a great partnership with Western University that assisted us. We made our meetings extremely accessible. They were in the evenings from 5 to 9. We provided a full sit-down working dinner. That was really important. We had child minding. We surprised transportation if they needed it, and we also had translators. We were very, as I talked about the process, we met deadlines. They held us accountable, and we held them accountable because we wanted to show that we were moving forward and accomplishing something. As we were flexible, we thought we'd be done this in 4 or 5 meetings, and it took us just over 9 months. But we planned those meetings to death. And as you saw from that one slide, it took a team of staff to make this happen. We learned, don't do it over the summer. We carried it out over the summer, and that's not good. You lose a little bit of momentum. And as I told you, we brought Jim Deers in to say what we couldn't say. And at the end, this was the residents' plan, their vision, their strategies, their implementation plan. So just adding some of the challenges. To this day, I think, we have some organizations, I think they say it in joke, but you never really know, being city staff, that were mad at us because they weren't allowed to be part of the process. Remember, we said this was residents-only task force. So to this day, we still get a little pokes and jabs. Gaining consensus was critical for us. It increased the number of meetings we had to do, but it was vital. And finally, we did a lot of internal conversations. I know I made it kind of sound easy, that this was top-down, first time ever, 3 departments, but we met with everybody. My director and I, we met with team meetings, we met with department meetings, senior management team meetings. We met with a lot of people prior. This was a lot of pre-work, and we also met with key organizations and leaders in the community and our other funders just to let them know what we were doing and how they wanted to be involved. So it was hard work and continuous work to keep everybody internally on the same page.
So as I mentioned, we had a celebration in December, which was a showcase, I guess, of a lot of our tools and resources that were the result of 5 years of work. It was also an opportunity for us to give some closure on the 5-year plan and to let people know that we were starting to think about what's coming up next. And you can tell by sort of the slides that we had a bit of a block party theme, so we thought that was appropriate for the celebration. So this slide just depicts 2 of our resources that came out of the strategy. One is a booklet that that talks about all of our different tools and resources. So things like how to start an outdoor skating rink. We have a movie kit program that for people to show movies in the park. So the safety audit that I mentioned. So that's a booklet that just says this is what it is and this is how you get in touch with us. And at the same time, we have a website which, if you go to that neighbourgoodlondon.ca, you can see those tools and resources that are straight out of the book, really. So it's the same idea as the booklet.
You asked what's next. Last year, the City of London's strategic plan was endorsed, and this plan identified Council's vision, mission, values, and strategic area focus during their term on Council. And to align with this plan, our Council now is currently working to adopt our first ever multi-year budget, our 4-year budget. So I don't know if you can see, but one of the strategic areas of focus is strengthening our community, and then alongside that, one that is near and dear to our heart, under that is vibrant, connected, and engaged neighborhoods. So through a lot of public engagement, as you can imagine, there are a lot of strategies. Through a lot of public engagement last summer, Council identified 12 strategic initiatives from the plan, and these are new initiatives. And these are the 12 that they asked city staff to develop business cases for as part of the multi-year budget. So based on the public engagement, they picked in a way their top 12. And these are top 12 like city building, everything from rapid transit to our downtown. And if you see the very first strategy there, support neighborhood-driven activities and decision-making, this was one of the top 12 strategies. So based on the work I've done and where we're going next with LSNS, we fondly call it LSNS 2.0, I wrote a business plan to increase that $100,000 by an additional $750,000 to support neighborhood-driven activities and decision-making by 2019. So we'll be going to Council in April with our proposed engagement strategy for LSNS 2.0, and it is our hope to have a final plan before Council by the end of this year for endorsement. So you can imagine that we have a busy year ahead of us. So finally, what we'd like to do is, in part for our year-end celebration Karen talked about, is we put together a video that we shared that really tells the story in a much better way with much better people than Karen or I could do.
I don't know about the audio on this.
Our London is a city of neighborhoods.
I'll just stop it. We're not sure if you can hear the. Can anyone respond whether you can hear us? Maybe we need to.
Here, we'll put it up loud. All right.
Fall of 2008, the City of London put out a call for interested residents to join a task force of people who wanted to make and keep London and its neighborhoods a wonderful place. Nearly all of London's 42 neighborhoods were represented in the 100-plus participants. We met for over a year, recognizing throughout that residents know what's best for their neighborhood. In the end, the residents defined an inspiring vision and a detailed plan to strengthen London's neighborhood.
Our London will be empowered, sustainable, with safe and active communities. Participating in the London Strengthening Neighborhoods Task Force taught me the value of resident-driven process. It inspired me to get more engaged and more involved in my neighborhood and ultimately to run for City Council.
The overall strategy focused on the 2 elements that make up all neighborhoods, people and places. Each strategy had multiple actions which were implemented over a 5-year time frame. We will care for and celebrate each other while encouraging diversity and inclusion.
The London Strengthening Neighbourhood Strategy set out to change the dynamic between neighbourhoods and the City of London. It felt like we had a seat at the table, and we generally experienced a new level of respect for City Hall.
The programs that came out of this strategy were smart, they were helpful to the long-established neighborhood groups, but they also managed to support new groups as they were just getting started. Not an easy task. Our neighborhoods will be environmentally and socially responsible, and will have available green space, vibrant local economies, and accessible amenities of daily life. Over the past 5 years, neighborhoods and their residents have come to play a major role in how the City of London approaches city building. We've seen the Transportation Master Plan, Downtown Master Plan, Cycling Master Plan, London Plan, Age-Friendly London, the Community Engagement Task Force, London's Cultural Prosperity Plan, and SHIFT all acknowledge the importance of neighborhoods and the central role their residents play in shaping the future of our city.
I'd like to personally thank each and every resident who helped to realize the vision of London's Strengthening Neighbourhood Strategy over the past 5 years. You know, we've come a long way, and we certainly have plenty of reasons to celebrate.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you very, very much. And I know we are hoping that we've got some time, and I know we do, looking at the clock, to kind of field questions from folks.
So we do have a question here from Erin J. from York.
Oh, go ahead. Yep.
So she writes, I feel like my biggest challenge doing similar work will be reminding staff that this is supposed to be resident focused and driven. Any suggestions on how to turn this curve with internal staff?
That's a good question, and this is an ongoing work for us. So we have, on my team, I have 4 community developers who basically are working in neighborhoods and with organizations and residents full time. And what's great, we support, and then we have part-time staff in recreation who has a community development portfolio. We also work alongside our staff in planning and urban regeneration and also in environmental services. So we've partnered with Campus for Communities, and we support all of our staff, and all of our community leaders. I think you heard Karen say we had over 200. So we have a standard community development certification, or community building, as we call it, certification. So we're all working along the same process. We're talking the same words, but more important, it's the same process, and it's an extremely resident-driven process. So not only do we hold ourselves accountable, but we have over 200 residents from neighborhood associations, from community groups that have taken the training too and the certification, so they hold us accountable. So this is what's really helped us to understand what is community building or community development, and how do we stay true to it.
Yeah, the only thing I could add is before we started this work, we did do some municipal scanning, and we visited a couple of cities, and we heard loud and clear from them that they had a lot of challenges when there were organizations at the table with the residents. They sort of took over the voice, and so we knew we wanted to hear the aspirations and dreams and stuff of the residents, so we didn't want sort of the intimidation factor of seasoned, speakers and organizations with their own missions that would cloud the desires of the residents. So that, we were able to say that we got that message from other municipalities.
Would you folks say, building on that notion, that because of the foundational work that you have done, and also the certification that you've invested in both for your own staff as well as for residents, that you could ultimately maybe envision a time when the balance would be, the balance of power would be sort of more equal, and some of those organization versus citizen dialogues could happen? Or do you think that it's really important ongoingly to keep them distinct.
I think it's understanding the role now that we play in every neighborhood is different, and it depends on the capacity and those needs of the neighborhood. I won't speak for Karen, but Karen does intensive community development, so she'll go into a neighborhood to develop. One of the tools she uses is supporting them to develop a neighborhood action plan. And I think the first neighborhood we went in for political reasons and supported. They didn't even have a neighborhood association, which they do now, and 7, 8 years later is still going strong. And we're totally out of that neighborhood. And we were always from the city staff side, we say leave no footprint. So then I think the next neighborhood she was in had a neighborhood association. After like less than a year, they said thank you very much, and they were good to go. So we're really clear on what our role is, and our role is to support you. And I think when you look now at neighbourhoodlondon.ca, we have a number of tools and resources that have been developed by residents, supported. Some of them are our own tools to make our own processes easier but more resident friendly. We are there to support you to however we can, but at the end of the day, it's your neighborhood. It's how you implement and how you own those tools. We'll just support you in that work. And it's not an ongoing process for us. It could be a little longer in some cases, but it could also be very short depending on the needs of the residents, the resident association or neighborhood group we're in.
And the other thing I guess is because we've been looking at the community development training with both staff of organizations and residents, we've developed a communities of practice where we have everyone together. So we're continuing the journey of learning together. So in that case, we can sort of share, not that it's a power thing, but it's at least we're sharing together, and sometimes the organization and the community leader are in the same geography or neighborhood. And so I think that's helping us to work better together.
Sounds amazing. Any other questions? Are you seeing people putting their hands up, Christy?
Yes, so I have a message from Beth from the city of Waterloo. She had some technical difficulties getting on the phone, so she apologizes for missing the first few minutes. Her question was about the scope. She says, your plan includes actions on a number of topics, elections, for example, that internally here at Waterloo might be seen as outside the scope, in particular beyond the responsibility of our community services department. How do you manage the scope, or did you? And how did you manage community expectations about what the city could realistically deliver on?
Well, that's a question.
Yeah, so I guess I go back to the scope. We did not drive the scope. Residents and the task force defined what the scope was, and you can see through. That's why we knew when we went out, that's why we strategically went out in the beginning, and maybe that's why you missed it, is we went out people in place. We knew at the end of the day, when you go out and you have your city hat on, like City of London, it does not matter what area you're from. If a resident has a question, I strongly believe, and this is how I have all my community developers feel, is that we answer that question. If we don't know it, then we find it. So as part of our strategy, why it was cross-collaborative and why we had that facilitators table, we had representatives from each of those areas there during the development of the strategy, but now they continue to meet on an ongoing basis, and we work together. Our partners in planning, environmental services, and my area in rec, they meet on a regular basis over lunch, and they talk about how they can work and share all our tools. So our tools on neighbourhoodlondon.ca are just not from LSNS, they're also tools from our different service areas, because we should be able to go out with that one voice. And if there is a scope, then you need to be very clear. As long as you're honest and straightforward from the beginning with residents what this is and what this isn't, then I think they'll respect that.
Beautiful. I have a question around, at the very opening, you talked about a core sort of vision of undertaking this work was about enhancing or improving community vitality in London. My question for you is, did you have a common definition or some metrics that you kind of used to define and describe what community vitality meant to you?
Sure. So as in my last slides, I showed you the priority areas of the new strategic plan. It was strengthening our community. So the priority in Council's strategic plan at the time we started this was community vitality. So all the work we do aligns with Council's strategic plan. So yes, in that strategic plan, they had outlined what community vitality was. And under that, that's where we felt in developing London's strengthening neighborhood strategy. And how it really came about is I used to work for a department called Community Services, and when our general manager was hired back just before 2006, he said, I want two things, a neighborhood chat strategy and a strategy for children, youth, and families. And from that, he created Neighborhood and Children's Services. We're now Neighborhood, Children, and Fire Services. We've come a long way at the city. We believe everything starts in a neighborhood. People laugh when you think fire, but you should see the projects we do now with our friends in fire. Fire stations are in every neighborhood. Why wouldn't we make them neighborhood hubs and gathering places? Why wouldn't we partner with them in what we do? We also have homelessness in our portfolio. It's not in community or social services, because where people live is in neighborhoods. So we've been very strategic, and this has all come about because of our the work the city has done to really put neighborhoods back in focus and as a key city building strategy.
Sylvia, I have a question.
Good. Yep.
Unless you wanted to respond.
No, I was curious though about just the community building certification process, and if that's something that is a resource or that they would be open and willing to share.
Sure, we can send Christy, and she's more than happy to put it in the minutes, the information for sure.
That would be good, because that might be something to make housing staff take, housing European staff.
Yeah, I have a list of resources I'm going to ask you for, so be prepared for that. So this is a question from Tabitha about the training for residents and staff that you mentioned on community development and the online training that was developed. Was it developed elsewhere, or did you develop it in-house?
We worked in, so back with another big project we did, Child and Youth, the Child and Youth Network that has over 150 organizations. We've been doing collective impact work with children, youth, and families in the city for probably close to 10 years. We adopted, one of our strategies is to build family centers in neighborhoods, and we adopted a community development approach to do that. So one of the tasks of one of the committees of service providers and city staff was to figure out how do you train community development. And while we're doing this, we found a tool that really aligned with the work. And from that, we worked with, back then it was through Alberta, and we worked with them to refine the tool. And then we decided, you know what, Karen and I were like training and going all over. Other cities were asking us to come. So we worked with a consulting company, and we kind of helped subsidize it at the city so we could get kind of what we wanted out of it. But they developed a community building certification, 2 different levels. And now what we do is we provide about $10,000 a year to our community to subsidize residents and some organizational staff to be able to take the training. So it's not owned by us. We had a lot of input. Karen usually goes on sometimes and does a session, but it's all online learning, and we're happy to share that link and website with you.
Oh. Any other questions bubbling?
I'm not seeing
I have a question about your municipal council, and if you can sort of summarize sort of the response. It's probably varied, but you know, some of the highlights in terms of how you've kept your elected folks kind of engaged, involved, informed, and in general, sort of what the council's response has been to this kind of work.
Right. So in the beginning, as I said, we took our strategy, our proposed strategy, to council for endorsement. We thought that was extremely important. We wanted their input and endorsement. Once it was implemented, the residents came and presented it, and the council endorsed it. At budget, we brought it forward with and then most importantly, every year over those 5 years, we had an annual celebration. We invited all councillors to that. And right now, with our newest council, as you saw in the video, our current mayor, he was a resident at the time on the task force, so that really helped. That's what kind of got him excited and passionate about politics, as he said. And we also currently have a city councillor who was on the resident task force too, so that helps. And we have several councillors who are extremely passionate about community engagement and neighborhood building. And I think that's why you saw them asking for London Strengthening Neighborhood Strategy when there were so many more they could have chosen from.
Absolutely. Christy, any other comments that you're seeing there?
I have a couple of thank yous for answering these questions, and looking forward to seeing the tools.
Yeah, me too. Ladies, thank you so very much.
Very well.
It's really inspiring, actually, to see how intentional you've been, how your principles align with how you implemented things, the comprehensiveness and commitment, you know, to work across, you know, in some ways a brief presentation doesn't seem to do justice to it, because it's obvious that you've done all kinds of internal organizational work within the city. You've, you know, done all kinds of capacity building work, both of staff but also of your residents, and have had a really good discipline about not doing for, but acting as a catalyst with residents. And I think sometimes that can be a hard line to walk, because it can be very easy, I think, often to fall into doing for people. So I can't say enough about how deeply we appreciate sort of the wisdom of your experience and your willingness to just be so transparent and share it. One final comment is, any advice? What's the most important piece of advice both of you would offer to folks who are just starting on this journey? Maybe we can wrap with that.
So just to let you know, so we're about to go off in LSNS 2.0, which we call it, which we will not call it ever again, LSNS or what it's on. But we're not doing a resident task force. We're not doing the same process because we're not starting from scratch. We're building on what's happened, not just through LSNS, but through all the other plans that you saw in the video. However, it doesn't mean that our foundational principles are any different. So actually, my whiteboard is full with it because I did some planning with staff, because we're bringing an engagement, our proposed engagement strategy for council endorsement in April. So we start by developing a one-pager, and in that it has our working assumptions of what this is and what this isn't going to be, and our foundational principles, and then our proposed process. And then we go out and we're shopping it around. So that'll be myself and my managing director. We'll bring it to the senior leadership table. We'll bring it to all the departments again. We'll get department representatives. So we will be shopping that around internally and externally to get input, to get feedback, to get how you want to be involved, and most importantly, to get buy-in. So to me, that was key. You start with that grounding and foundational work, and it helps you then stick true to it. And everybody knows what that is.
So the foundational principles are key for you, and grounding everything flowing from that.
And for this one, because it's our, so much has happened. It's our working assumptions that we're building. For example, we're building on what's already been done. We're not starting again. We're not going to go back and what's a vision? What is your vision for next?
Right.
We've already been there. So we need to really think about what those, what this is, what this isn't going to be, and then what are those guiding or foundational principles.
Beautiful. Karen, how about you? One most important piece of advice. If you can distill it down to one.
Well, I guess the key is to have residents. So I always go back to sort of community development 101 and building relationships. So what I think has been key for the whole thing is our internal relationships, so our relationships with our other colleagues in other departments, and our relationships with residents. And you know, they won't come to a meeting if it's not fun, as Cheryl said, or, you know, it's not worth their while. So we have to be really appreciative of who they are and know and get to know them and build a relationship. So that's probably my key message in anything I do anyway, but I would say it's really important for this process as well.
Beautiful.
Sorry, sometimes as municipal staff, you have to give permission to your staff to say, you know what, going out and having 2 or 3 coffees a week with leaders of neighborhood groups or associations is a good thing. It's about building relationships. It's not an add-on to your work, and it's not something as municipal staff we think, oh, we shouldn't be doing it because it's not at our desk. That's totally wrong. As Karen said, it's all about building relationships, and we're all out there all the time. It's not just about building them, but it's keeping those relationships and being really true to them. That is key in the work, all the work we do.
That's beautiful. All right. Well, thank you again both very much. And I'm just